Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Well, I'm warning you now, this is not going to be a quick video, but something I want to document here. I am in the process of rebuilding a lot of stuff on this Mustang before I basically set it up for cruising, I guess you could call it. Let's first start off with some shipments that came in today. Close this up here. It's my little electrical kit for wiring, because I am doing some wiring today. First and foremost, a case of 134A refrigerant for me to be able to recharge the Mustang. It does take about 34 ounces, 34 to 36 ounces, depending on the gauge set, of refrigerant charge. So that'll be 3 cans, and then I'll have the rest of these cans to use for any other recharging work I do for the next 10 years, because these cans on Amazon Prime, this entire case is 59 bucks. So I rounded up to 60 bucks. These cans are a hell of a lot cheaper than paying $13.99 at Advanced Freaking Auto Parts, just so they can send you a Speed Perks coupon and make you think you're saving money. What a gimmick. Next thing I got is this, this is called Bow Lube. I saw this on Brian's mobile channel last video that he did. He was doing some suspension work on his Dodge. This stuff, from what he was using on it, is the best metal lubricant when you're trying to drill through metal ever made, and it's by the guys at Boeing, from what he's explained. So I bought it off the link that he sent. Made in the USA, so you definitely know it probably works. He was using it. It looked like it was awesome. Anytime I had to do any drilling on this old Mustang, it's been a bear. So Bow Lube, I think he was calling it Bow Blue, but it's Bow Lube paste. Got that. Got some vacuum line from Advanced Auto. I'll show you where that comes into play soon. I also got some bulbs from Advanced Auto, some new plugs to put in the Mustang, some regular old auto lights. This came today, K&N for the Mustang, but it is the right CFMs I need, but my stud on my air cleaner is a little too long, so I got to do some modifying on that, but that's no big deal. It's all fun. I got a new fuel pressure gauge by Holley, and I ditched, and this is something I meant to talk about in my last video. This is what I had on there before, which, while is pretty, you'll see how it's liquid filled. That is a no-no, and I learned that the hard way. That's a no-no when you're on the engine like that. It's fine here on these regulators, same exact gauge as there, same exact gauge as over there, but it's no good when it's near a heat source like that. The silicone or whatever that they're filled with gets hot, and when it gets hot, it causes it to read 0. So obviously it doesn't have 0 fuel pressure because it runs fine. So that's going on. I'm doing some instrument cluster work over here. I pulled all this out because the factory, God, this is going to be a long video. The factory fuel gauge, which is here, never worked, ever. It would just peg out at full, then it would kind of blip and jump around and do a little happy dance. And upon inspection, you'll see that the terminals in this are held on by a tiny little wire there, and they kind of just sit in here like that. And this one's the same thing, but the problem is that this little plastic piece that's on here acts as a spin stop for the studs, but it's plastic and it's all brittle and crap. It's just junk. It's never going to work. So while I really wish I could maintain the original look and feel of the gauges, it's just not a reality unless I want to go spending $1,000 on replacement gauges that look like OE. So this is the old bezel that I pulled out of here, and you'll see on the face side what I've done. I can rotate it around gently. These old bezels are very, very fragile and brittle, so you don't want to bang them around a lot. But what I did was I retrofitted my VDO fuel gauge to match my center gauges, and it's not too far off from the factory speedometer and these idiot lights, which I have a plan for coming up soon. If this proves itself to be unreliable, I'm going to replace the speedometer and add an actual 4-inch tachometer there, all by video vision, if I decide to go that route here soon. So That's the lens for it. Everything's kind of taken apart there, but this is good. This is working well. I tested the gauge. It reads beautifully. Now I know how much damn fuel is in this car because that motor's thirsty. And the last thing I want to do is go drive somewhere and run out of gas because I was too lazy to fix an old rickety fuel gauge. So out with the old, in with the new. I guess sometimes you got to do that on a resto mod. I mean, this isn't a you know, numbers matching restoration by any means. It's definitely a resto mod. Hot rod, I guess you could call it. So that's going on. Next thing I want to highlight is how I got that working is my new favorite tool, which you'll see is connected here. This thing is worth its weight, literally worth its weight in gold. I cannot tell you how awesome this thing is. This is the Power Probe 3. And this is the set with the leads and everything that it comes with. All these different leads, different cables on how to hook it up. All that stuff is pretty unnecessary. You don't need it all. What you need is the tool. Here's the cable for it, right here. And it's 20 foot long, so it can reach all the way around a car, which is badass. Before I go on any further there, I did mount these gauges in here. And I'm moving everything from the front of the car on into the engine bay here. So I eliminated the 3 gauge set. Here in my bucket of parts now. The volt gauge never worked, and it's just too much here in front of the air conditioning, and I'd rather have serviceable AC than have a bunch of ugly gauges and wires there. So all I did on these was just hook up the mechanical parts of them, which is the oil and the water and the tach. So there's not going to be any jazzy fancy lights, but I'll be able to monitor my engine diagnostics right here. Just like before, without having to go in the car, and they're pretty subtle and out of the way. You don't even see them in there. So yeah, anyway, back onto the Power Probe. Power Probe, best tool in the world. Yeah, it looks like chaotic hell in here, but it's okay. It's easy, not to worry. You can see it there, it's lit up. And this is the most practical tool I've ever used when it comes to electrical diagnostics. This thing, basically, in a nutshell, it's a circuit tester. It has the probe on there, just like your typical dummy light ones have that usually decide to work when they want to, and you got to keep them pinched on the ground and everything else. This, as I just showed you, hooks directly up to your battery, and it's always connected. And you have the ability not only to test circuits by, like, let's say, if we want to test a ground source, like, is this a good ground, right? So we'll turn on our audio cues, and we'll say, is this a good ground? Yes. Lights up green for ground, so obviously there's paint on here, so it's not that great, so that would definitely be an indicator that you want to sand it. But if we touch in here, you can see, or get on a bolt, it'll tell you that that's a ground. Awesome. Now, what about if something's hot? You can simply go in here, and if I wanted to, I can go in here and I can touch, that's ground, ground, not doing anything, not doing anything. No, no. So none of those are hot. Now, if we turn the key on, start testing. Bingo, found a hot. And basically what it's going to tell you is not only is it hot, let me turn off the audio cues so that we don't annoy people. See how it's hot? It's also going to tell you the voltage that it's reading, 11.6, constant. So you know there's no draw, and you know that's a switch source. So that'll definitely help you out when trying to try to dial down an issue. Now, more advanced tactics is what I used it for today. Is not only do you have the ability to test circuits, but you have the ability to give circuits power. So, turning back on the audio cue for you to show you, if I wanted to say ground something, I can use the alligator clip right there that's on my leg. I can go ahead and clip that to a ground, like say on a gauge, and then I want to power it, I can simply touch my probe end to the positive terminal, and I can automatically supply it 12 volts. So what I did in the case of testing that fuel gauge and finding where the sending unit lead was that comes off the fuel tank, is I gave the gauge power the entire time, and then I came in here and I tested these wires one by one to see which ones were giving power. Well, it so turns out that when the wire is connected to this one right here, it gives a very small voltage over to the fuel sending unit, and that's the one that my fuel sending unit gets connected to. That's the wire that's going back to the fuel tank. So it's a really, really, really nifty tool when you're actually trying to isolate and figure out where circuits are. I also tested this circuit board with it and found out a lot of things with this. These are the most useless. This is a new one, also made in the USA. These printed circuit boards are the most useless piece of technology ever created. They're the most unreliable contact you can find. So that's my opinion on that. So yeah, I had to take out the steering wheel to pull the gauge cluster out, unless I wanted to scratch everything up trying to feel my way through everything. So that's kind of why this is like this. This is my test lead that I was using to test my gauge. That's not permanent. I'm going through here and I'm checking for any bare wires since all the new install of the AC work. I'm modifying this AC vent, taking these clips off the bottom here that you can see. Those clips are coming off and they're going on the sides because that prevented the air diverter to turn to the left and the right. There's a minor detail there, overlooked in the instructions. I removed the very controversial tachometer that was sitting here in the center on the right, and I actually added a full manifold vacuum gauge, which is going to be extremely helpful for monitoring the performance of the motor. That was essential that I add that in there. I've been wanting to add it in for a while. I just needed to get the right vacuum line and pour it into my manifold vacuum. That's all connected. We can go ahead and test that now. If we just kind of hold the camera here, you'll see I'll crank the engine. And that obviously is running full manifold vacuum. That's cool. So there's a lot kind of going on here. I wanted to document all this while it's in a chaotic mess. This tachometer never worked. I had it hooked up to the MSD tach signal, but I think it's got something to do with this pin configuration and why it's not working. So I'm going to go ahead and test this outside of the vehicle and figure out how I want to hook this up. This thing was $100, so this is probably going to go back to Summit. I still have the original packaging, and I'll try to get a store credit for that. So, yep, that's going on. Fuel gauge, vacuum gauge, new fuel pressure gauge. AC service is going to happen again. I did isolate and repair the leak with an O-ring. That's going on. I think that's about it. This is the longest video ever. Talked your ear off here, but yep, this is the. You want to build a car? Well, this is what you're going to be doing. It's going to be what you're dealing with. It's a constant repair. Just put it that way. If you're going to restore anything, so going to get that stud cut down. That filter looks much better in there than the paper style. I love the way that looks with the red there. So you got to definitely run the K&N, get a little bit better flow, much better than that paper crap. So next step in the game is going to be putting all this back together, installing it. I'm going to test the speedometer to see if that's working. I think I'm going to have to get a new speedometer cable. That one's pretty fried from the headers. Put all that back together. Summit will take my tachometer back as a return. You're going to see another modification into this to get at least a tachometer put in here. I was going to have that guy retrofit this to put a factory tach in there. That's still on the table, but that's a $250 purchase, and I definitely don't want to be dropping that kind of cash right now. So, all right, guys, thanks for watching. If you have any questions or comments or encouragement, or if you want to talk shit, whatever, just pipe it down below, and I will respond. See ya.